8 more hostages who've been held in Hamas captivity for more than 480 days have been released. 3 Israelis and 5 Thai nationals were handed over to the Red Cross and transferred to Israeli forces. Author and news contributor Oli London is in Israel and he joins us now. Oli, you've spent time with families who've lost loved ones during the horrific October 7 attack. And what an incredible and emotional time to be in Israel. Can you give us a sense of what it's like on the ground at the moment as more hostages are finally returned?
Well, it's a very emotional day. It's been over 15 months and these new batch of hostages have been released. We saw the release of Agam Berger, who was just 19 years old when she was kidnapped. And we saw scenes of her release in Gaza. She was paraded on stage in front of a crowd of thousands, jeering at her, taunting. The images of her being transported to the Red Cross were absolutely harrowing as the crowd desperately tried to touch her and manhandle her. So it was very traumatic to see. I've been at the hospital where she is now receiving medical treatment, spoke with the medical director of the hospital who said that she is in good health considering what she's been through, but of course it's going to be a long journey to recovery. Another hostage was an 80-year-old Israeli man that's been held for 15 months. He was heckled and shoved by the crowd, and really terrifying scenes. In their last moment in Gaza, they were given this final indignity by Hamas. And it's a tough time. On the one hand, you have Israelis happy and celebrating the release of their loved ones, but it's also a dark time thinking of what these people have been through and also knowing that there's still around 80 hostages in captivity.
It's been absolutely horrifying to see the images of the way these hostages have been treated. Those young women being transported out of Gaza, surrounded by masked men who are deliberately intimidating her. I can't imagine how Israelis are feeling watching that. You also met with Israel's First Lady. Can you give us an insight into what that was like?
Yeah, so I had a meeting with Mikhail Herzog and also Rachel Goldberg Poland, who many people will remember as the mother of former hostage Hirsch Goldberg Poland, who was executed with a gunshot wound to the back of his head in Hamas captivity. And he previously had his arm blown off by Hamas when they kidnapped him. And, really harrowing to hear the story. But, what was... what I witnessed was Rachel held her head high with dignity. She is speaking up every day for the other hostages. And for any mother to go through what she's been through is completely unbearable. But the fact that she was there with the First Lady, and the First Lady has been an incredible advocate for the hostages and also for speaking up for the women that were subjected to gender-based violence during the October 7th attack. So it was very emotional meeting with them both and hearing Rachel's testimony, hearing the work she's doing to help other hostages, and hearing the First Lady's work to secure the release. Both incredible, inspiring women.
Absolutely. As part of this ceasefire deal, another 100 or so Palestinian criminals have been released from Israeli prisons, including 32 with life sentences. I mean, what's it like in Israel? Are there big concerns about this ceasefire deal?
Yeah, there's a lot of people that have been very unhappy. A lot of people were unsure of the deal, and it's not exactly a favorable deal in Israel's favor when they have to exchange, over 1,000 terrorists and people convicted of murder in exchange for innocent civilians and women that have been held hostage. So it's not the best deal in Israel's interest, but unfortunately it has been 15 months, and these families shouldn't have to wait a single other day for the return of their loved ones. So it's been a tough situation, but Israelis are rallying behind the families. They are praying that many of the hostages are returned alive. We already know that some of them will be returned as bodies. So it is a tough time.
I want to talk to you about the humanitarian aid that is going into Gaza. Just last week, there was more than 4,000 humanitarian aid trucks going into Gaza. Can you bring us up to speed about what's going on there?
Yeah, so I visited the Kerem Shalom crossing, which is just next to the border of Egypt and the southern border of Gaza, which enters into Rafah. And, Israel facilitates between 600 to 900 aid trucks into Gaza every single day. They do not place a limit on the amount of aid It can be unlimited, but the issue that's happening is the aid trucks are being inspected. They're being sent into Gaza by Israel. And once they're in Gaza, it is up to the aid agencies on the ground to distribute these supplies. One problem is that many of these supplies just get dumped and left there and do not get checked by some of these agencies. The other issue is once these trucks then drive through Gaza, you often get looting, Hamas hijacking the trucks and taking the supplies away from the civilians. And any civilian that tries to get some of these goods from Hamas end up getting shot in the leg. So, all of these Palestine activists, it's interesting. They always have this anti-Israel sentiment, but the real people, the only people oppressing the Palestinians are Hamas, which treat Palestinians appallingly. They kill them, they shoot them, and at the end of the day, there's a lot of aid going in. It's just up to the aid agencies to distribute them correctly.
Donald Trump has signed an executive order to fight anti-Semitism. We've seen so much of that over the last 15 months right here in Australia. We've seen them on university campuses over in America. This executive order must be welcome news for the people in Israel.
Absolutely. It's about time that these foreign students on visas in the United States do get deported, because for the many that were taking part in these horrific pro-terrorist anti-Semitic protests that were arrested, they should not be in the United States. If you're going to a foreign country, you are a guest of that country. You need to respect the laws, you need to respect the people, and respect the fact that there are many communities in the US, including the Jewish community, that deserve to be respected and appreciated. So, it's a welcome news. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu welcomed the move as well, saying it was an excellent decision. Many other policymakers have praised the decision. And it is about time these students and foreign nationals face consequences for their actions. And I think this will be a strong deterrent in the future in putting off these foreign nationals from engaging in these horrific anti-Semitic and pro-Hamas protests.
Donald Trump's also paused funding for UNRWA, that UN organisation with deep links to terror. I mean, there are calls for Australia to pause funding for UNRWA as well. Being over in Israel, can you tell us what the reaction has been like over there to that decision?
Well, as we know, there were at least 12 UNRWA employees that took part in the October 7th massacre. Some of them were seen on CCTV dragging bodies of Israelis they had just executed and taking them to Gaza. And also, some of the hostages were also kept in UN shelters. Some of the recently released hostages were kept there. And we've seen, some of the former hostages were kept by UNRWA teachers. So there's a big problem with UNRWA in Gaza working hand in hand with Hamas. And, at the end of the day, Israel is going to ban them from Israel. Donald Trump has obviously signed this order. And at the end of the day, they are complicit with Hamas. And much of the funding going to UNRWA is actually falling into the hands of Hamas. So it's an incredibly corrupt organization that does nothing to help the Palestinians. And, many of their employees are pro-Hamas and have been exposed for working alongside them.
Oli, you're there on the ground. You've been spending time with families. Nearly everyone in Israel is, of course, affected deeply by what happened on October 7, 2023 and what's been happening over the last 15 months. How has this impacted you? It must be so heartbreaking speaking to families who have lost loved ones, who have had to deal with the trauma of knowing that their loved ones have been held by Hamas in tunnels.
Yeah, I mean, I've met families this week from the Druze community who lost 12 children in a Hezbollah attack last year, a rocket attack in Majul Shams. I, listened to the testimony of a mother who was weeping and crying, and it's been, months and months since she lost her little 10-year-old boy. I met with fathers, that had lost their kids. I met with former hostage Moran, who had both of her legs broken during her kidnapping, and she was subjected to very cruel treatment. Met with many people, survivors, family members, and it's really harrowing. But one thing I will say is the resilience and determination of the Israeli people. Despite what some of these former hostages have been through, they are holding their heads high. They are retaining their dignity. They are rising above Hamas, which tried to break their spirit, tried to crush their spirit. And one thing is clear: Hamas are never going to break the spirit and resilience of the Israeli people. They are strong, they are determined, and they will get through this difficult time. And they are united in bringing the remaining hostages home and united in supporting one another during these difficult times.